Jim, you're one of the um, best and most important political scientists in America, and certainly one whom I admire a great deal. And yet, probably no political scientist has written more critically about the state of the profession and what we're teaching children from high school through college to adult citizens in the country. In the fall 2012 issue of the Claremont Review, your piece on the election of 2012 called How Obama Won and Lost, you take out after what you call the explanation industry in America, which is largely driven by a certain kind of political science, and you say that that they are taking the politics out of politics by taking the contingency, the freedom of human action out of politics. What do you mean by that, and could you elaborate on what that tells us about the state of political science today?
Well, I think in America we have a particular and peculiar relationship with political science, because this is the system in the world, the only system in the world that was found with the direct aid and assistance of political science. It's an extraordinary thing that this was the predominant mode of knowledge that the founders acknowledged as having an influence on what they did when they founded the system. And I'm speaking of the writers that they looked to, but also what they put in practice themselves in the period following the revolution and up to the convention, where they studied things in the way that political scientists do. So in a way, the Constitution was written in large part through the influence of political science. And it was a political science, as we know from the outset, that appreciated the role of chance in human affairs. Political science could propose something. It could have an impact on something, but it had no pretension to think that it could dictate that something would happen. Political science was the counselor to those acting, to help them act the best they could in the situation in which they found themselves. A knowledge that could be helpful to statesmen and citizens. But here we are today, and the purpose is somewhat changed in much of political science today. In the case of the election that I mentioned, the emphasis of much political science is trying to set up models in advance which can tell you what the outcome will be. I think this can work when you have a strong circumstances favoring one candidate over another going into the campaign. But gee, there's a campaign as well. And
what's wrong with that? I mean, it's one thing whether the models predict correctly or not, and that's a kind of internal criticism. What's wrong with modeling? What's wrong with, what effects does that have on us, that is on citizens, or on our understanding of free government?
Well, the model might or might not predict the outcome. It can't fully, I would say. But you could ask, how does the model in any way enter into the situation to improve the quality of actions of either the leaders or the citizens? They read the model. Are they more equipped to deal with the situations at hand? Are they better prepared to act as citizens or statesmen? There's nothing in the model which has a moral or educative function for the acting human being, even if it's correct.
Now, what about polling?
I have nothing wrong with polling. It's a way of finding things out, but it's not political science polling. It's a way of measuring what the people think today. It doesn't perform this function of serving as a counselor or an educative tool for citizens or statesmen. So to the extent...
Quite the contrary, you might say, right?
You might say it maybe focuses the mind on what the many think, and therefore boosts the power of the majority, which of course political science in its wisdom usually suggests is something you had to approach with some caution.
Right.
So these are tools and instruments of measurement, of study. They're very important. I've nothing against them, but they can't become the substance of what political science was supposed to do.
Yes, but polling also has sort of Tocquevillian effects, doesn't it? I mean, it suggests that wisdom is whatever the poll conclusion is, you know. If we ought to think the way most of us say we think in the poll, I think that's there's a strong instinct in democracy to run with the herd.
This is why in the campaign you want favorable polling, because
yes, right.
you begin to think that there's momentum. The only danger in favorable polling is that it will lead your side to be lackadaisical. So you sort of plant the favorable polls, you urge, and you're very happy when you get favorable polls, but then you immediately say, we can't be complacent.
Yes.
But
This seemed to affect Romney to some degree, didn't it? I mean, he had a lead. He had opened up a lead after the first debate, and then he seemed to sit on that lead, which began to erode fairly quickly.
I believe, we will have to look at it. I believe that the lead held up, in my view, let's say the popular lead, until the hurricane. Mm-hmm. And I believe that this may be wrong, but I believe that if the election had been held 8 days earlier, that Romney would have won the popular vote and the presidency, but the popular vote. This could be speculation, but I think there's enough evidence to suggest that it's so. So I'm not sure that he actually sat on the lead, but contingency intervened to his disfavor.
Meteorology.
I know that Obama spoke of the oceans ceasing to rise, but it just didn't rise. That didn't rise fast enough to eliminate global warming.
Yes. Well, it turned out that sometimes the rise of the ocean is favorable politically.
That's exactly right.
In this case. Now, and so what does that, the fact that Romney could have won if the election were held a week earlier, let's hypothesize, what does that tell us about the role of contingency or chance in politics and in political science?
Well, it tells you something that there was things happening in the campaign in and of itself which could have affected the outcome. I mean, in common sense, we know this, but the day the election is over, look at the analysis. People begin to say, oh, it could have only turned out the way that it did.
It was inevitable.
It was inevitable, and suddenly every analysis begins from that. And this happens in history generally. History is an overdetermined mode of discussion. It's important to put yourself back into the contingent flow of events to understand that but for something happening, things could have turned out differently. The reason for this is because it's good advice to people. I know we used to play war games when I taught in Germany, in Garmisch, at a military school. And the war games were predicated on the idea that, look, you might have won the war, but you might not win the next war under the same, using the same model, because it was chance that determined the outcome. That's an important lesson for the political actor.
And since progressivism was the source of a lot of American political science, as well as of a lot of American politics, modern liberalism, in a way, progressivism is hostile to chance, isn't it? To contingency in human events.
Well, the idea would be in the purely historical schools that the fate of history is determined according to laws, and therefore chance plays no decisive role in human affairs. So that if you could discover those laws, you would know how things were going to turn out. But if we take an understanding of what an event is, and what I take an event to mean is something that could have turned out otherwise if human beings had acted in a different way. I believe history is always histories of events, and therefore, by definition, the direction of history cannot be known in advance.
And hence nothing in politics is really inevitable, or at least nothing like no event is inevitable.
Nothing is inevitable, and therefore it points to another kind of political science. Sure, we want to know directions and tendencies. That's part of what the statesman wants to know. That's part of political science. What is the likely direction of things given what we now know? But coupled with the idea that action can always lead to different outcomes, and therefore, if action can lead to different outcomes, what margin of maneuver do we have, and what direction do we want to take the flow of things? That's for another sort of political science that serves the role as a counselor and asks the question not merely where are things going, but what's best.
That's
because
right.
If you have freedom, you obviously want to use it in a way that directs you towards the good and away from the bad.
Right, a kind of political science that asks not just what's next, but what's best.
What's good or what's best.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you very much for coming on The American Mind.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.